Hello, welcome to another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw. In the news, following our coverage of Marjorie Taylor Greene and her famous tweet on President's Day calling for a national divorce, some people saying that means secession, some people saying that means just a separation of red and blue states still within some sort of federal union, and Marjorie Taylor Greene not exactly 100% clear on what she means. But in response to that, over this week and at the end of last week, we noticed a new trend. Polls coming out showing that a tiny minority of Americans wanted to have a national divorce. Basically, 80% of Americans were totally against this and saw no point in it at all. Two different polls, one from the Hill magazine and one from Ipsos, and I think it was Ipsos and YouGov. And we'll cover that now. But basically what this episode is going to be about is the title bar below. After Marjorie Taylor Greene made her famous tweet calling for a national divorce, they tried to get people to not pay attention for about a week. This is stupid. She's ridiculous. Then about a week and a half after that, they came out with these polls. Only 20% borrow this conversation or participate. 80% don't even want to have anything to do with this, whether you're talking to an average American or political party. Now, it's almost like they tried to say she's stupid and dumb and don't pay attention. That didn't work. And so then they had to prove to people that Americans weren't actually interested in this conversation. And so they had two different polls come out showing that. What's intriguing is that the new polls that come out showing a lack of interest in national divorce don't match the earlier polls that came out before her famous tweet when the environment wasn't as fiery and hot and intense. Why do the new polls coming out not match the old polls on national divorce? We'll walk you through all the polls and we'll show you that someone is not making sure you get the whole story. Coming up real soon. We'll see you in just a second. All right, well, let's get right to it. Let me show you the sources, and then we'll go to a deep dive. I'm not going to cover how Marjorie Taylor Greene made a tweet talking about national divorce. We'll assume you already know that. Now, the first poll we're going to talk about is the Sabato Crystal Ball, University of Virginia Center for Politics. This came out in September 2021, 2 years ago, September 30th, 2021, almost the end of 2021, almost the beginning of 2022. We're sort of at the beginning of 2023. So if you want to say this is a year and a half old, about that. New initiative explores deep and persistent divides between Biden and Trump voters from the University of Virginia, which is well respected for political discussions. And we will be covering these charts here and here. We're also going to be taking a look at this poll from BRIGHTLINE Research that was also taken in 2021. So this one came from September 30th, 2021. This one also came in June 2021. So about 2 years to a year and a half old. We'll also be taking a look at this poll from our friend of the show, Jeremy Zogby of Zogby Polling. Zogby Polling, one of the most excellent polling organizations in America. They've called the presidential election many times very respectable polling. We'll be looking at some of the numbers from Jeremy Zogby here. And finally, we're going to compare this poll, and this poll to these two polls. First one is by Ipsos. Separately, the AXIOS Ipsos 2 America Index finds that most Americans oppose a national divorce. It came out in March 2023 by Ipsos. Here's the Hill magazine. Majorities of both parties reject Greene's national divorce. So this one is saying average Americans, most Americans oppose national divorce. This one is saying most politicians of both parties reject Greene's national divorce. They're going to go to 69% of Democrats are opposed and 60% of Republicans, according to this Economist YouGov poll. This one is going to show, where 77% oppose it. Opposition rises to 61%. Democrats plurality feels secession or not are not optimistic about the state of our democracy. So this poll, hey, majority of Americans oppose secession, came out March 2023. Then there's this poll, hey, majority of politicians oppose national divorce, came out March 2023. So March 16th, 2023, March 8th, 2023, March 16th, 2023, March 8th, 2023. So these polls came out within a week of each other right after the tweet. These polls, this did come out in response, but this one did not. It was completely independent, and so was this one. Now, what do they all say? What is the big thing? All right, let's get right to it. Let me show you what the discrepancies are and what they're trying to pull. Okay, so I want to make sure this is showing. Yep, okay. So here we go. Let me jump this in. The crystal ball poll on September 30th, 2021, 80% of Biden voters and 84% of Trump voters feel elected officials from the other party are a danger to the USA. 74% of Biden voters and 78% of Trump voters feel voters from the other party are a danger to the USA. So about 80% of Biden, 84% of Trump says all other Americans are a danger to the USA. 74% of Biden voters, 78% of Trump voters, all other members of the other party are a danger to the USA. So all of the Americans who voted that way and all of the elected officials, about 80% of them, are all bad people. Pay attention to these numbers because they do not match the Axios poll. I'll show you in a second. This poll also said that 41% of Biden voters support national divorce, which means 60% doesn't. And 52% of Trump voters support national divorce, which means 48% don't. We're also going to show how this number does match the Economist poll. Okay. BRIGHTLINE research, 47% of Democrats support West Coast secession. 66% of Republicans support Southern secession. This directly contradicts the Economist poll by 180 degrees. I'll zero in on that. Axios, March 2023, March 13th, 2023, 80% see no chance of division decreasing. That does match the crystal ball poll. 75% of Americans see more dividing us than uniting us. That does support the crystal ball poll. Only 15% agree that there is more that unites us than divides us. And only 47% would move if their state seceded, under half. 81% oppose seceding. This does not match the Economist numbers, and the survey is taken at the same time. We'll show you that in a second. Now let's get down to the Economist YouGov poll, March 7, 2023. 56% say states may have the right to secede. 55% say they would be open to recognizing a vote if their state wanted to secede. 58% said they would oppose their state holding a referendum. That doesn't match the Axios numbers. 62% disagree that we want a national divorce. That doesn't match the Axios numbers. 69% of Democrats disagree that we need a national divorce. That does match the crystal ball poll. And 60% of Republicans disagree that we need a national divorce. When we look at Jeremy Zogby's data in July 2020, for example, when asked if states seceding from the union is legal, 39% said illegal, 36% said legal. 43% among Democrats said it was legal, 36% under Republicans said it was legal. In a second question asked in 2021, do you think we're going to engage in national divorce? 29% said it's time to engage in national divorce. 24% weren't sure, which means 53% or majority of the country was not sure that it wasn't time for a national divorce. So let's go over that one more time. First, I want to point out the discrepancies. So here's the Axios poll that came out recently, okay? And here's the Economist poll. This Axios poll said, oh, a majority of Americans don't back independence. Like 80% don't back independence. And here's this Economist YouGov poll. Majority of political party members don't back independence. So 81% of the public would oppose seceding according to Axios, March 13, 2023. 60%, 69% of Democrats disagree that we need a national divorce, and 60% of Republicans disagree that we need a national divorce. This article focused on this one headline. This article focused on just saying 81% were opposed to seceding. This article focused on just this number, 60% and 69%. So my first question for you is, if this article focused on just this one statistic, why didn't it mention these? These are significant numbers that actually back up that national divorce is an important conversation. The Axios March 13, 2023 poll only said 81% opposed to seceding. End of story. That's the headline. Moving on. Then you had to read down and go, well, actually 80% also see no chance of division decreasing. 75% of Americans see more dividing us than uniting us. That's almost 80%. Only 15% believe that we're more united than divided. And 47% would move if their state seceded, which means over half of the population, or 53%, would stay. So why did this article use this as the headline and not these? 81% of Americans are opposed to seceding, but 80% of Americans also see division not getting better, and about 80% of Americans see that we're more divided than uniting. Well, those kind of contradict, don't they? If I said 81% opposed to seceding, but equal numbers believe America's coming apart, and equal numbers believe there's nothing bringing us together, it kind of tamps down on the we don't need to have a discussion about national divorce. See how this number here is directly opposed to these numbers? This says one narrative, nobody's interested in it. These numbers say actually a lot of people are interested in it. They did not mention these numbers in the headline. They only mentioned this number. Why do that? Unless you're trying to be dishonest. Let's take a look at the Economist YouGov poll, March 7, 2023. Same thing. They focused on this. Democrats disagree we need a national divorce. Republicans disagree we need a national divorce. This was the title of this article. Okay. But why did they not mention this? 56% say states have the right to secede. 55%, almost identical, say they would be open to recognizing a vote if their state wanted to secede. So while 60% and 69% of members of the political parties are against this, actually a majority of the members of those two parties say you have the right to secede. So why not mention this? Hey, people are opposed. A majority, 60% are opposed in both parties. By the way, clearly over half are also saying you have a right to secede. Why would you not mention these in the headline for this article, but focus on these for this article? For the same reason as you did it here. 81% opposed says don't pay attention to this discussion. 80% saying there's no chance of division decreasing. 75% saying Americans are more divided than ever, says you should have the discussion. 69% of Democrats disagree. 60% of Republicans disagree, says you don't need to have a discussion about national divorce. Nobody's going to follow this. These numbers saying clearly over half of the country feels that you do have the right to secede does mean we should have this conversation. So right off the bat, I'm questionable about these polls because they focus on this when these numbers compete with the narrative for this, and they don't really focus on these at all. You have to find those buried in. Same thing here. They focus on this. They do not focus on these. Why would you do that? Unless you're trying to hide something. Okay, so let's get into where there's commonalities. Oops. And okay, so the first thing is 41% of Biden voters support national divorce, means 60% don't. That does match the Economist poll. So here's the Economist poll. About 69% of Democrats disagree that we need a national divorce. That does match the crystal ball poll. So about 69% of Democrats say we don't need a national divorce in March 2023. And about 60% of Biden or Democrats say we don't need a national divorce. That does seem to match. These polls are 2 years apart. Here's the crystal ball poll, and here is the Economist YouGov poll. And they do seem to agree. Democrats largely disagree with national divorce. Put it in summary. Around 60 to 69% of Democrats oppose national divorce. Fair enough. Now, 58 would oppose their state holding a referendum. Doesn't match the Axios numbers. So let's go up to Axios. 58%, 53% would stay if their state seceded. 58% would oppose their state seceding. So these polls don't match. 58% in the Economist poll taken on March 7, 2023 would oppose a referendum to secede. Yet another poll taken a week later shows that 53% would stay if their state seceded. How do you have over half of the population would oppose their state holding a referendum to secede in one poll, and then another poll the exact same week basically says over half would actually stay if their state seceded? See how those don't match? Axios, 53% stay. Economist, 58% would oppose referendum. That doesn't match. So that doesn't really match. 62% disagree we need a national divorce. Again, doesn't match the Axios numbers. 62% disagree we need a national divorce. But 80% see no chance of division decreasing, and 75% see more dividing us than uniting us. So 80%, we are totally divided. 75%, there's more dividing us than uniting us. Yet 62% say we don't need a national divorce. These numbers are directly opposite. And again, these polls are a week apart. How did these polls that are 1 week apart come up with very radically different numbers on the need for a national divorce? This one sounds like, nah, we don't need a national divorce. Everything's cool. This one sounds like we definitely need a national divorce. And yet they're only a week apart. That's the other discrepancy. Here's my other one. 60% of Republicans disagree we need a national divorce. That directly opposes the BRIGHTLINE poll. Let me show you. 66% of Republicans in the South support secession. But now we're supposed to believe 60% of Republicans disagree that we need a national divorce. Now, the South doesn't represent all Republicans, but it's certainly a Republican bastion. That's not a direct contradiction, but it basically it is. So 60% of Republicans oppose national divorce in 2023. But 66% of Southern Republicans support national divorce in 2021. So these contradict. This survey here says about 2/3 of Republicans would back secession in the South. This says about 2/3 of Republicans would not back secession anywhere. They don't match. All right, now let's look at the Zogby polls. 39% legal, 36% said illegal. The Economist poll says 56% says states have a right to secede. This one says only 36, so there's some discrepancy there. 43% of Democrats said it's legal. That kind of matches this. 47% of Democrats support West Coast secession. And Republicans, 36 said it's legal. That does not match this. %53% were not sure it wasn't time for national divorce. So if we look at that, 62% disagree that we need a national divorce, Economist magazine. 53% said they weren't sure it wasn't time for a national divorce. Jeremy Zogby, polling in 2020 data, just a year before. So these almost contradict. 62%, we don't need a national divorce, according to this Economist poll. But then you got 53% saying they're not sure it was time for a national divorce. So when you add up all these surveys, the Crystal Ball survey, September 30th, 2021, BRIGHTLINE, June 2021, AXIOS, March 13, 2023, Economist, YouGov, March 7, 2023, Jeremy Zogby, July 2021. Here's what we get to. Around 69% of Democrats oppose divorce. Sure. 75 to 80% of Americans see the other side as the enemy with no chance of softening their position over 2 years. Around 55% or over half say states have the legal right to secede. Where we get into highly questionable is 80% oppose secession, 62% say we don't need a national divorce, and 60% of Republicans disagree that we need a national divorce. So I find these numbers saying Republicans are against this and a clear majority says we're opposed to secession and national divorce to be highly questionable because they contradict other polls. However, these polls typically seem to align with saying that around 55% say states have the legal right to secede, 70-80% say the other side's the enemy and they're not going to change their opinion, and about 69% of Democrats oppose national divorce. That makes sense because when you get to the East Coast here in California, it's like 32% are for secession. So these seem accurate. These don't seem accurate. And again, why would you do that? Hey, folks, we don't need to have a conversation about national divorce. See, even Republicans hate this idea, and a majority of the public doesn't believe in it. And everybody's basically opposed to secession. Actually, over half say you have the legal right. And actually, 4/5 of America say we are falling apart and dividing and nothing's going to bring us together. And yeah, about 60% of Democrats oppose national divorce. Let me show you some of the original surveys. This is the Axios raw data. This is where the data came from. People with opposing political views don't share my values. Only 27% disagreed, which means about 70% said, yeah, people with opposing political values don't share my values. Now, what's interesting is when you look at race, 44% said they disagree that people from different races share my values. But 70% said people who don't share my politics don't share my values. So there are more people who don't feel in alignment with people who have a different politics than people who don't feel in alignment with people of different races. Right now, there's more that divides us than unites us. Right now, there's more that divides us than unites us. Would you oppose your state forming? National divorce, the Economist YouGov poll. Here's the original questions. Here's the BRIGHTLINE survey. This is the map that the information came from. Here's the Center for Politics Crystal Ball poll. And here's the numbers where they came from. So there you have it. That's basically, these polls don't match. They don't match. So what we can tell you is that a majority of Americans do support secession or are not opposed to it. Hold on, let me get this right. One second. That's the first conclusion that we can reach. The other one is that around 55% say that it's okay to secede. The other one is that about 2/3 of Democrats are opposed to this. I don't really buy that 2/3 of Republicans are opposed to this at all, but I could buy that 2/3 of Democrats are opposed to it. That doesn't change the fact that a clear majority of Americans believe that you do have the right to secede. A couple polls showed that. And that doesn't change the fact that multiple polls are showing about 4/5 of America sees the other side of the enemy and divisive and nothing in common with them, with no chance of softening their position. But if you read these articles, you would think it's the opposite. Majority of both parties reject Marjorie Greene's national divorce. That sounds like political parties are dead set against this. Everyone's against this. Separately, Axios Ipsos finds the Two Americas Index find that most Americans oppose a national divorce. But while those numbers might be true when we get into it, are you opposed for a national divorce? Maybe. But do you feel we're all Americans? Hell no. Do you think we're divided? Yes. Do you see us coming together? No. Do you view the other side as an enemy and existential threat? Completely. This is schizophrenic. I'm not interested in secession, but I don't like you, don't want to have anything to do with you, and can't ever see myself with you. That just doesn't make any sense. And I already showed you how those two polls saying nobody's interested in this didn't bring up other numbers buried in their poll. They kind of contradict the narrative. It's almost like they want you to think something that's not true because too many of you are actually engaging in this discussion, and they don't like that in a democracy. Yeah, they don't. And that's why I tried to break it down. Okay, coming up, we're going to have another show on Tim Pool and how he lied about CalExit. We'll see you in just a second.